Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. This is Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. This is the Networking RX podcast. Thanks for those who are tuned in. Obviously, if you're listening, you're tuned in. But if you are subscribed, I really appreciate it. And thank you for referring other people. If you've been with me for a while, you know that I've had lots of guests on. And from time to time, I bring guests back on. Back in December 5th of 2019, it's a long time ago. It's almost a year ago now. It was episode 129. I had a gentleman on by the name of Bill O'Haron. Bill is a corporate financier, licensed social worker, and we have just kind of kept in touch. And I knew he was working on a plate. The word plate. I knew he was working on a book. The word plate comes into this.
Plate are the things that my wife throws in my head.
Yeah, well, I know. But the name of the book is Waking Up Marriage. And I'll read this email he sent me. The whole book thing for me started when my wife Linda threw a plate at my head 20 plus years ago. It was the best thing that happened to me. So anyhow, Bill, welcome to the program. You've got this book out, and I think this is great. This is a podcast really about professional relationships, but you and I have talked over the years or over the year that relationships are relationships.
Absolutely.
And it's all kind of the same thing. And so a lot of these things that we're going to touch on in here really kind of resonate back or pull back into our business relationships. So, before we hit record, you're talking about trying to close a deal with, one of your corporate type clients. And kind of the same sort of things as you're not getting a plate thrown at you. But
I could.
You could. But it's the same sort of dance, right? We kind of go through these things. So anyhow, let's talk about the book, and then we'll kind of kick off from there if we can.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Frank. Thanks, everybody, for your time. I spent, again, like you said, it catalyzed, the writing of it catalyzed many, many years ago. And what I realized, and again, this applies absolutely every day to all relationships, but what I realized very early on was that the emotions that we carry with us are a lot older than any relationship literally we've ever been in. So for instance, I got married to my wife. She'd gotten upset with me, and she got so upset with me early on in our marriage, I realized that the level of her intensity and frustration was well beyond what I could have actually created in her because I hadn't known her for that long. And so what I call that is that there's archetypes. There are, inside of us, we have these kind of embedded reactionary patterns. Jung called them archetypes, where we respond to a certain person, a certain experience that we have, especially in relationship. How I respond is something that I've carried with me for many, many years. And I'll give you, for instance, so I say that marriage is 8 relationships, which means that I carry 4 embedded archetypes in response to any interaction I have. I have a response to the male archetype, called the father archetype, the patriarchal archetype. There's some kind of natural response in human beings to the father archetype. There's a natural response to the matriarchal energy, the female archetype, the mothering archetype. That's 2. The third is my response to relationships. What I experienced growing up is through the lens of how my parents behaved, not good or bad, just the experience that they had. I witnessed that. So I have a certain response pattern to the interaction, to the dyad of a relationship. And number 4 is I have a response pattern to myself, how I understand myself, how much work I've done on myself. And I haven't done, when I first got married, I hadn't really done much work on myself. So I was really unconscious of all these patterns. So those are the kind of, I carry 4 archetypes. You carry 4 archetypes. Your wife carries 4 archetypes. Clearly, my wife carries 4 archetypes. So any marriage is really 8 relationships happening at once. In the business world, absolutely applies. I have a boss, an old boss, whatever it might be. And so he's going to kick up in me. First one would be the archetype towards the fathering figure, right? He's in an authoritative role. if it's a he or a she, if she's an authoritative role. I've had a few female bosses that have been fantastic. They're going to kick up that female archetype response in me. So that's kind of where I start when I look at relationships in anything, in any part of my life, any part of anybody's lives. There are these embedded response patterns. And that's where really all the work began. And what's interesting, what I found interesting over the years is, if you look at the second law of thermodynamics, and here you go, you throw the science in, is that the second law of thermodynamics say that two bodies interact, and it's called entropy. After a certain amount of time, they're going to even out. Hot's going to become cooler, and cool's going to become hotter, warmer. So the two bodies are going to interact, and it's the friction. Second law of thermodynamics is really based on friction. The two bodies interacting are going to find some kind of equilibrium. Now, in marriage, often 50% of marriages fails because that friction's too much. In the business world, happens all the time. Your boss is too much, your colleagues are too much, that friction's too much, people bail out. And my thesis, my belief, my high conviction is, when we bail out because of the friction, we're losing all the good stuff. So the reason why I called it Waking Up Marriage is because you really need to embrace the friction in order to build a relationship. But the most important thing is, by doing that, you're actually learning and becoming more conscious yourself. The only way to gain consciousness, to become aware, to grow, for Frank to become truly Frank, for Bill to become truly Bill, is that we have to embrace that friction. All that information around those archetypes, all that stuff's going to come up in the friction. And then when we embrace that and learn and grow from it, that's where a relationship gets really good, when it gets past and through the friction. But most importantly, it's how I grow up as a person. That's how people mature. Men, in particular, we struggle with that friction. We tend to run away from it or retreat from it. Therefore, we don't actually grow up. So I believe there's a lot of people walking around out there, men in particular, that aren't really mature because they're not willing to face that friction. So the archetypes and friction are really kind of the core. I could go on and on, but those are really the core beliefs that I carry when it comes to relationships, especially in the business world and, of course, in the marital world as well.
Yeah, we certainly talked a lot before we hit record, and I was talking about my own vulnerabilities, my own admissions. For the listening audience, I tell people I have a money problem. It's not I'm short of money. I just feel like I'm always short of money. I could win the lottery tomorrow, and I've often wondered about that. And then talking to you, I realized I had a father who grew up in Chicago, Depression era, and that he was very in tune to that, and his parents were very in tune to that. So it's really not even just mainly it's 8 relationships, but those relationships are carrying Absolutely. Forward baggage.
Yeah.
It just keeps going forward and forward and forward.
It's amazing. And you actually, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry, Frank.
No, go ahead.
What you're talking about, and we've done a ton of research on this, is that the first 10 years of your life, whether, and mostly you're not going to be aware of it as an adult, is you've absorbed, literally biomagnetically, you've absorbed the emotions of your parents. You've absorbed their feelings. You've absorbed their dispositions, right? So I inherited my hair color, my eye color, my bone structure, but even more so, and people, you got to read the science on this. It's powerful stuff. We absorb the disposition, the characterizations, the nature, literally the emotional set of our parents comes down the line, and they inherited it from their parents. And the heart's a magnetic. If you look at the science, the heart is literally an antenna that has electrons and cells in it that actually absorbs the information coming from another person's heart. Powerful research on your parents' heart and your heart were connected. 80% of what you pick up the first 10 years of your life is nonverbal. It wasn't what your dad was saying, it's how your dad was feeling and how he was feeling about money. Less than, more than, whatever it is, you picked it up, and that's really powerful. And again, that's what comes up in a relationship with your boss, with your friends, with your spouse, whatever it is. Your feelings, these old emotions, we can't run from them because they're in there. So what I say is embrace that emotion and disposition towards lack, towards money, whatever it might be, to then dredge it up and go, oh, okay, that was carried down from another era. How do I embrace it? How do I use that? How do I leverage that? How do I understand it better so I don't pass it down to my kids? And you said it before we hit record, our kids are absorbing our disposition. And so again, the work always circles back to me, right? I could complain about, this person or that ball. I could complain about, but it has nothing to do with another person. It all has to do with coming back to Bill and understanding self so that I can be more aware and kind of undo the feelings that we undo, these emotional imprints that we have, these reactionary patterns, so that I can become a bigger, fuller person.
Well, yeah, I guess we really have to kind of work on ourselves. But even when I'm working with other people and I'm getting reactions, and this all stems back to our first conversation, a year ago, a lot of it's, a lot of it's this, a lot of it's looking at them as well, looking at, I deal with all types, and I ask myself, okay, what's their background?
Mm-hmm.
What baggage are they carrying? What were their parents like?
Yes.
I see insecurities in people, and it's like, okay, rather than letting that stuff frustrate me, because it can.
Yep.
I'm just like, okay, there's something there. I know they didn't have a father.
Yeah.
And I'm not feeling pity, but just trying to understand there's something there. They've got to be the center of attention because of.
Yeah. You nailed it, Frank. And that is such an important piece of the whole relational puzzle, especially in business, is that it just happened today in the workplace. One of the guys, kind of went off on a kind of a tangent, and I can see, the more work you do on self, I'm not saying I'm smarter or bigger or better. I've just done a lot of work on self. I've sat quietly a lot. I've kind of recognized a lot of my own emotions. I can see when a really mature, really wealthy man, woman, doesn't matter, their emotions get kicked up, and I can see the little kid in them. Mm-hmm. And so I look past that I'm not hanging on that reaction right there. I'm looking past that, going, what's the need that really successful business person is really asking for, but they're doing it in a funky way because that's their immaturity. It's not good or bad. It's just their stuff. I look past their stuff. So when we work on our own stuff, it's really much easier to look past other people's stuff and get to, that's the issue. He wanted to get this done more quickly. It wasn't getting done more quickly. We got it done more quickly. And so, it's really good to cut through other people's stuff. Like you say, when Frank works on Frank, you can much more readily get past other people's funky stuff, let's say.
Well, you have to know those things, because if you're, if you're of a certain mindset, and there's Myers-Briggs and there's DISC, and which is the best, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't want to even get in a debate.
Yeah, that'd be a 2-hour conversation.
Right, but if you're of a certain mindset, sometimes that doesn't work with other mindsets. Yeah. And if you're not willing to back off of that and just kind of be empathetic to, okay, you know what, they're not really going to respond to a high D.
Yeah.
And I see it with my wife. There are certain things I do, and I can just see my wife kind of clam up.
Yep. Absolutely.
And it's just, that's her way. And it's nothing personal.
Yeah. And what I've realized and that's a great scenario. What I've realized is when I see that happening in my wife, I back away when the initial vibration is really high. I can see through it, and then I can come back around and we can talk about it. But if I hadn't kind of worked on a fair amount of Bill, I would react and create more pushback, which is going to create a higher negative vibe in her.
Yeah.
I want to touch base. This is a really interesting data point. Dan Goldman did a ton of work on emotional intelligence, right? He's kind of the godfather of EQ when he wrote his book, EQ, Emotional Intelligence, back in the 90s. He says that when a business executive gets past, I believe it's the first 8 to 10 years of their career, right, which still should leave them 30 more years in their career, 80% of the success that they get in their career comes from EQ and not IQ.
Right.
In other words, and I'm sure you've seen this data, right? It's our IQ does not change after 16 years old, right? We are our IQ, our intelligence,
right,
doesn't fall past 16, but our EQ, our emotional intelligence, our ability to empathize, to understand the room, to feel, to intuit, never stops evolving. And so if 3/4 of your career, once you get past a certain point, is based on emotional intelligence, because you've kind of the first 8 or 9 years, it's your intelligence that got you there, but it's your EQ that gets you to greater success. Then if we're not doing the work to increase our EQ, then, our success might be stifled. And I think that's really important to know, because really what we're all talking about the same thing is if Frank works on Frank, Bill works on Frank, Bill works on Bill, then we have the chance to really use that tool for our success as our career goes on.
No, I mean, that's absolutely true. If I was on another podcast a couple of weeks ago and asking about, what advice would I give a younger version of myself? And that was essentially it, is, don't worry about taking the right class.
Yeah.
Worry about being the right person. And that's a hard lesson to give a kid. I'm sure somebody said that to me.
Yeah.
Probably my dad, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's not even who you know, it's how you interact with them.
Yeah.
But I remember even in law school, every year in law school, there was a guy. It just happened to be a guy the years I was there, who was brilliant. On law review, had all the answers, did great in all the classes. Could read the 50-page Supreme Court opinion from 200 years ago and make total sense out of that to them.
Yeah. Couldn't
get a job.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because they couldn't establish rapport.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting. As you were talking, I was also thinking about, I was talking to another friend today that just launched a new business line, and he's super excited. And, we were talking about, who he's been reaching out to propound the story and tell the story. And he's like, it's all my business acquaintances and friends, business friends. And we were just talking about, think of everything you've done the last 10 years, every moment that you had an intense, good interaction. If you did it with the right intention, EQ, if you did it with the right in service to somebody else, EQ, then, 10 years later, you're going back to those relationships. And you know what? People are going to respond, relatively positively because they had a good experience in each moment. So we're constantly building our repertoire. We're constantly building our cachet of friends, for lack of a better word. We're building this kind of body of people that can help us. And even if we're having interaction that we're not doing much, if we're leaving the right stuff, that's kind to the person and just doing the right thing, that's going to pay off. And not to say every interaction has to have a ROE on it. Not everything has to return on it, on equity or return on investment, but it means a lot. And that all comes down to EQ. And it's, your buddy that was a lawyer, like you have to understand that stuff. And I think that's the work that we've been doing, is trying to understand why relationships, some work and some don't. It all comes back to self again. I wish I could blame my, whoever for, any of my mistakes. They're all mine.
Well, but the beautiful thing about what you said about IQ versus EQ is that you can wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, I'm just not smart enough. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? But you can wake up and say, you know what? I have been, pardon the expression, I've been a total ass.
Yes.
And I can be better.
Yep.
And there's to me, there's a degree of hope. I've screwed up relationships, not entirely, but I've made bad moves, and I can come back. I can say I'm sorry, or I can do the next relationship and do better, but I can't be any smarter. I'm not going to be a better tax attorney, because that wasn't for me.
Yeah, you can't be really any much better at doing a spreadsheet on investment, but you can be better at interacting with a higher level potential investor that can look at the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet's never going to change. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it is powerful that we have an opportunity every single day to be slightly more, to be slightly better. And again, that's not our intelligence. We know that. It's about, we were just talking about, same fellow, we were talking about, interactions where we could have been more maybe abrasive and really kind of shut somebody off, but we didn't. And it's paying dividends for him. And it's certainly, I just feel like it's so important that we're constantly watching myself, and that really, you said hope, you used the word hope. And that's why I kind of, going back to the book, I call waking up marriage, is that a lot of people have come to me saying, well, I've been married X amount and I'm really struggling. I just don't think the marriage is worth it. I mean, I just pack it in. I said, listen, absolutely, you can pack it in. But why don't you use the altar of marriage? Why don't you use this thing that you're in right now that's so intense? Use it for your own growth. And that to me is one of the core tenets of coming back to, that next relationship, business relationship you're going to be in. It's somebody, that person's really intense and they're really hard and it'd be easy. Screw that. No, if you embrace that, there's hope that you can move through that. And it's only through your own IQ and your own ability to be patient and let that other person kind of vent their stuff. And then you can get past that. That's why, really the kind of the name of the book was Waking Up Marriage, that there's a ton of, it's pure hope and it's realistic hope, because if you work on self, you can get past anything. Yeah. You can get past any relationship if it's what you want and you're willing to do the work on it. And that's the business world. Is you look at great business guys, you read their bios, and they got fired, they did this, but they stayed with it, they believed in it, and there's an other side. I always say, walk into the fire, turn and face the fire, walk into it, let yourself be burned, i.e., let yourself wake up to self, and on the other side of that is a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. I'm looking at the book here, and again, the name of the book is Waking Up Marriage, with Bill O'Haron.
It's Waking Up Marriage, Finding Truth in Partnership. And the reason we put truth in partnership is because we believe that by doing the work on self, you're going to find out the truth about who you are, who Frank is, who Bill is, who Johnson, whoever it is. You're going to find the truth by working on self in the partnership. And that, to me, it's really about, I'm kind of dare I say, obsessed with trying to become more and trying to be better and kind of grow through. It almost makes me tear up that I just believe in the constant growth of the human condition. And I think marriage for me has been a great arena. I call it an arena, a playing field, whatever it is. It's a great playing field. I know there's going to be more intensity in the next 2 weeks of my marriage. Can I get through that? And so Finding Truth in Partnership, just adding a little bit more to that.
Well, I want to jump off and just quickly read. It's the opening paragraph of the chapter, Marriage, the Great and Difficult Story. Running a marathon while getting a root canal is child's play compared to marriage. I believe that developing mature, supportive, and loving adult relationship with your partner is the most difficult thing you will ever do. Why do so many fail at this? And why is it such a challenge? How can something that begins so reasonably, comfortably, and passionately and instantly become so unruly? And it's interesting. It's, the most difficult thing you'll ever do. And the reality, in reading that, it's like, if you can conquer the marital relationship, then the ones you deal with for a couple hours a day at work.
You nailed it.
Yeah. Well, I'm constantly telling people how do I handle this situation? How would you handle it in a personal setting? Well, this is what I would do. There's your answer. That's
Bingo.
it.
Bingo. It's funny. You just triggered. I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine, really successful businessman. And he had this partner, this is last week, we're having this conversation. He's known this partner personally for years, I think 20 years. Great success, made a bunch of money. They're starting this new partnership. And literally in a blink, a week or two ago, it all just went sour. And this good friend / business partner, big money at stake, just went dark and just said, blah, 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 just went off on him. And it's exactly what you just said. He said he kept trying using the business angle. Hey, we can do this differently. The guy just cut him off, wouldn't talk to him. He sent him an email and said, listen, I completely apologize. You're one of my best friends on the planet. Forget about business. Forget about all this muckety muck. I just want to talk to you brother to brother, friend to friend. And they've rekindled the relationship. They don't know where the business piece is going to go.
Right.
The point is, it's exactly what you said. He went pure EQ, pure emotion, pure use of self.
Yeah.
Just get the relationship back, because that business only works on a relationship, and relationship is always personal. Period. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, you go on and you talk about relationships, and they're really everything. And that's, Harvard's come out with a study that's essentially said that, it's an 80-year study, I believe. It's just, looking at people, and it's, really loneliness is the big epidemic. Forget obesity, forget COVID, forget smoking, forget heart disease. It's loneliness.
They talk about, you nail it, they talk about loneliness, detachment, not feeling connected, not feeling whole, not having a loving object to love and be loved. as worse than a diet. Like you said, I believe it's worse than smoking.
Yeah.
And in terms of longevity and general health metrics, you look at folks that don't have a meaningful relationship. There's a longing in there, and that longing is a weight on the body and soul, for lack of a better word. So yeah, that grant study is really amazing. And that was a class of 43, 44, and 45, I believe, out of Harvard. And they studied them. They're still studying, and they're studying the grandkids of the original subjects.
Yeah, we're really kind of in the golden age of information with respect to relationships, and I got it from you, and I tell people all the time, the number one relationship you need to deal with is yourself. That's it.
It's the most painful.
Well, it is, but people, if you can't get that straight, if you're a mope, nobody wants to be around you. That's the easiest way to put it. But people, okay, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Well, it's just, but it's not just being a mope. It's, it's being self-centered. It's being, for me, the money issue, I know it can become a problem because even in business, people will come at me and they're like, hey, we should be doing this, this, and this. Yep. And it's really on me as the business owner to kind of fork over the money, but it's like, oh my God, I have the money today, but what about tomorrow? I might not. And so I might be slower to pull the trigger than other people. There's a reason for that.
Yep.
And not that it makes it right or wrong, but there's a reason for it. And I need to take my time in making that decision.
Absolutely. And I think, the key for me, and it might be different for other people, is that self-reflection is really the only way for me to understand me, right? I could try medication. I could do all this kind of therapy is good stuff, really good stuff. But the bottom line is to be able to slow down enough to listen to our own feelings. I'm not going to get this quote exactly right, but there's been no act in the history of man that occurred that wasn't driven by an emotion. Every single thing we do, whether our rational mind thinks it or not, whether our neocortex believes it or not, everything we do is being impelled and compelled by an emotion, by a feeling. And it's the very thing that our rational mind doesn't really want to deal with old feelings, doesn't want to really deal with, sadness or longing, whatever it might be. But once we start doing that and we introduce, this is kind of coming back to core tenets, this is the key tenet of what I've always kind of talked about and read about and written about. You have a heart and you have your brain. You have the left and right side of the brain. You got the emotional world and you got the thinking world. If those two worlds aren't seeing eye to eye, aren't feeling each other out, we're a divided person. We're a divided human. And that's where the issues come in, is we have to bring up the emotions and introduce them to our adult self. You need to bring up the 10-year-old inside of you, the 12-year-old, the 15-year-old that has stuff around money, as I do too, stuff around money, and introduce it to your rational mind and have the two of you play around with it, so to speak, and process that to understand, that's what it is. That's how I can use it. But we live, a lot of our adults, a lot of us live this separate life. We have our thoughts, and then our feelings only come out when we're angry, when we're sad, when we're dreaming, and we're not, we're dislocated. We're kind of a divided person. I call it the half syndrome. It's in the book. We're half a person. We're using half our tools if we're not bringing our emotions into our regular daily interactions, into our relationships. I have to bring Bill into my business relationships. Otherwise, I'm just another guy trying to sell something. And it's just flat.
Yeah. The book is Waking Up Marriage with Bill Heron. Bill, it's on Amazon. Where else can they get it? How can they get you? How can they help you?
Yeah, that's great. It'll be out at the end of July. It's been 8 years in the making. I'm really, really excited just having these conversations. It is super amazing. Thank you, Frank. You can go to wholecounseling.com. It's like Whole Foods, but wholecounseling.com. That's my website. There's some chapters in there already on the site, but the book won't be out until the end of July 2020. I think that's probably the best place to start is go to the website.
Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be November.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so it's out. Go get it. Go get it. Buy it for a loved one. Somebody who. I really appreciate your time today. This has been great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.